Is there anything better than a good ghost story? Listening intently as someone else recalls the terror they felt, encountering someone or something that they could not explain? Well, how about 10 ghost stories? Enjoy. Late at night, I usually go to the bathroom multiple times. But for the past 4 days, every time I go to leave, I can see myself still standing in the mirror from the corner of my eye. It's like the other me is watching me leave the bathroom. It terrifies me to the point where I almost run out without looking directly at the mirror. I never told my husband about it because I didn't want to acknowledge it out loud. Earlier today, I took a nap in our bed while he sat in the chair next to it watching TV. When I woke up, he told me that he had seen me sit up and crawl backwards to the edge of the bed and stand up in front of our bedroom door from the corner of his eye. He thought it was weird that I got up like that because I'm in the last month of my pregnancy and I can't really move so good without it hurting. So he tried talking to me. When I didn't answer, he looked at the door to find me not there and still sleeping in bed. It really creeped us out, and I finally told him about what I've been seeing in the bathroom. He thought it was creepy as well, but didn't want to really talk about it anymore because he thinks it will give whatever it is power or energy. I have no idea what it wants or why we've both seen it. When I was 15, I traveled to Europe with my family. We stayed in Edel, Germany in a small inn for a few nights. My parents had a double on the second floor. My sisters had the double bedroom next to theirs, and I was lucky enough to have a single room all to myself at the far end of the hall. When we went to check into our rooms, as soon as I entered the hallway our rooms were in, I remember almost feeling as though I walked into a wall of bad energy. I felt so unnerved and uneasy in that hallway, but I passed it off as an overactive imagination. I slept the first night without any issues other than waking up a few times. The next morning at breakfast, one of my sisters mentioned feeling really uncomfortable in the hallway, almost as if the air was crushing. It unnerved me even more that I wasn't the only one who felt weirded out. Plus, she was an adult at the time, so it further cemented in my head that the wing of the hotel was odd. Later that night, I am sleeping peacefully, when at about 2 a.m. I'm awoken by something ripping the covers off of me and being jerked 2 feet toward the end of the bed by my ankle. At first, I thought someone had broken into my room because when I turned toward what had grabbed me, a huge looming black shape was visible in the darkness, like a man was in my room. I frantically flipped the light on, only to have nothing be there. The window was locked from the inside. There was no one in the closet or the bathroom, and my room was also still locked from the inside. I stayed up the rest of the night scared shitless playing Cooking Mama on my DS. Next morning we're at breakfast, and my sister mentioned that she was up half the night because she thought she saw a person silhouetted against the wall of the room. But when she turned on the light, there was no one there. It was just a bizarre and creepy experience. We checked out that day, so I didn't get to experience anything after that, but it still freaks me out to this day. One night when I was maybe 10 or 12, I had trouble falling asleep. My bedroom was the entire top floor of our house, with my bed and such being on the left side, and storage closets and a play area being on the right. I was lying in bed when I heard a noise from the other side of the room and see a rocking horse begin to rock. It was sitting just outside of one of the storage closet doors. It proceeded to rock its way halfway across the room and stopped dead under the ceiling light. At this point, I was freaking out and buried my head under the blankets and never peeked them out again until morning. It was confirmed to not be a dream, as the rocking horse was still in the middle of my room when I woke up. Furthermore, I got a stern reprimand from my parents for being up out of bed playing with my toys well past my bedtime. Their bedroom was directly below the storage closet play area, and had heard the creaking of the rocking horse shuffling across the room. When I was a teenager, I used to babysit my cousin Alyssa. She was little, maybe almost 2, maybe a little older. Old enough to say sentences. So I'm giving her a bath before bed when she looks out into the hallway and gets a terrified look on her face and starts crying. At this moment, my aunt's Pomeranian starts going nuts as well, barking and growling in the hallway. The atmosphere in the room became uncomfortable, and I started getting scared. I took her downstairs from the 3rd floor in the townhouse and tried to calm her down. I asked her what was wrong, and she said something along the lines of, "The man with the black eyes was there." When I continued to pry, she looked up at the 2nd floor stairs, her eyes getting big, and looks at me, bringing her finger up to her mouth and says, "Shh," while making her head shake no. I lived in this house with a basement, and every time I walked up the stairs, I would get this weird, creepy goosebumps feeling on the back of my neck. It didn't make me uneasy to go down the stairs or be in the basement. My craft room was down there, and I spent a lot of time down there. After a while, I would have items I was using disappear when I would look away from them. I would search, and one day I got frustrated. To no one in particular said, "Ugh, can I please have my scissors back?" I had just looked under a pile of new mail, and when I turned my head, there were my scissors on top of the pile of mail. I talked to my neighbor, and she told me that the original owner of the house was a jolly old man who loved to prank people, and that he had fallen coming up the stairs one day and died. So I think the goosebumps were him trying to tell me to be careful. And every time after that, when something would disappear, I would politely ask for it back, and it would appear in a place that I could not have missed it before. So thank you, old man. It was fun. My daughter was 4 years old when we lived in our last home. I was a single mom at the time, so it was just she and I alone in the home. I always got an uncomfortable feeling in her room, particularly the closet area, but never thought much of it. Until one evening, that is, I had put her to bed, and as I was doing chores, I walked by her room and heard her whispering. I listened for a bit, thinking she was talking to herself, but it was definitely a two-way conversation, with her saying, "Uh-huh, okay," stuff like that. I walked in and asked her who she was talking to. She smiled awkwardly and said, "No one." I took her out into the hall, and she wouldn't say anything, but I could tell she was afraid. Finally, we went outside the house, and she said there was a man in her room who didn't want us in the house, and he had told her this and to tell her mom to leave. I moved us out a month later, and she has not since ever had an episode like this. One day when my daughter was 2, we were having a typical terrible twos moment. She was throwing a bit of a tantrum for about 5 to 10 minutes, couldn't get it under control. At some point, she rather suddenly stopped and started staring at the wall. She then started lightly giggling. It was weird. One second she's crying and screaming, and the next she's smiling and happy. Then she starts saying, "Funny lady," over and over. We asked her who she saw, and she pointed to the wall and again said, "The funny lady." When we asked her to describe who she was, She described my deceased grandmother. I mean, exactly described her. She had never met her, and I don't think had ever seen a picture. Not that a 2-year-old could remember a picture. I'm not much a believer in the paranormal, but I know for sure that my daughter got a chance to meet my mom, and that makes me happy. When I told this story to my parents, they didn't seem as shocked as I was. When I tried to get a response from them, they looked at me and said, "I guess you don't remember that you met your deceased grandfather when you were 3. The same exact thing had happened to you 30 years ago." I had been on the phone with my then boyfriend, and he said something that made me think he was chauvinistic, not nice. And I remember telling him that if he knew anything about me, he knew exactly where I was going to go. I hung up the phone, got in my car, drove to the park. The sun was kind of down below the tree line, but it wasn't dark yet, and I pulled into the parking lot. I thought it was weird that there were 2 cars pulled side by side talking to each other. When I got out, the guy in the truck was just staring at me in a horrible way. When someone just looks at you like they're looking through you as if you don't exist. Okay, this is weird. It's late and no one's ever here. And then I thought, whatever, they're leaving. I don't care. I have my own problems. I only took my keys with me because I didn't want a big purse banging around. Headed across the field. But you have to cross to get to the woods because there's no trail. I was taking my time and calming down. And then I started realizing it had gotten really quiet. I didn't hear the birds, couldn't hear squirrels, just heard something big moving through the woods. I was thinking in my head, maybe it's a dog. Then I heard the voices. The first voice is a male's voice, and he said, "I know I saw her going this way. She couldn't have gotten that far." The second voice comes and it's quieter, and it says, "Shh, she'll hear you." Okay, so there's 2 men in the woods and they're looking for something, obviously. And I kept thinking, it must be their dog. Maybe they've lost their dog. And then I thought, they wouldn't try to sneak up on it. I stood there frozen because that's the kind of person I am. I could hear them getting closer to me, and I don't know how long I stood there waiting for them to get to me because I was completely frozen. And then I heard the other voice. It was distorted, like if you heard someone talking through a closed door or talking underwater. You could understand what they were saying, but the voice wasn't right. It wasn't in my head because it had a volume and a pitch that changed my thoughts. I could almost feel where it was coming from. It was behind me and a little above, like it was taller than me. And it just said, "Go to the river now." And I don't know if I was more scared of the fact that there was some disembodied voice or person talking to me, or the fact that there were 2 men in the woods looking for me. So I listened to the voice, because I really didn't have any other option. Took off toward the river. I was making a ton of noise, because I was just going as fast as I could. And the voice came back and said, "No, quietly." I got to the river and jumped down the embankment, squished myself against it, squeezing down into the smallest, tightest ball I could. And the voice kept telling me to stay. And I just sat there, hoping whoever was in the woods was going to leave me alone, and I wasn't going to have some kind of breakdown. I kept hearing them moving through the woods, and I could tell they had split off. As I sat there, the voice just kept telling me to stay quiet over and over again, like it was trying to comfort me. I could hear what sounded like someone was right above me, and if I leaned out, they would see me. But I just had to look. I tilted my head up a tiny bit, and I could see the tips of construction boots hanging over the edge, and I could see hanging next to them a dirty old rope just swinging next to them. I don't think I even thought anything. I was so scared. I just tried not to breathe. It felt like hours, but I know it couldn't have been that long. The voice was even completely silent. There was nothing but me hearing this man breathing. He started to walk away at some point, and the voice kept telling me to wait. So I waited. And finally the voice said, "Go now. Go to the field now." It was screaming at me so loud. So I ran through the woods and got out to the field, far, far from the cars and street. It was getting dark, and I could see the parking lot, but it was so far away. I'm running, and I start hearing footsteps running. And at first they're farther away, but they're so much faster than I am, barreling after me. And there was nothing. I fully expected to see at least one of the men there, but it was silent. The only thing I could think was that the footsteps must belong to the voice. And then I hear it again, screaming at the top of its lungs that I need to run right now. And the footsteps come back, and they're in pace with me, running next to me through the field. I had 1,000 crazy thoughts because none of this made any sense. I finally get to my car, and I see both the cars were parked in different places with nobody in them. I refused to look behind me. If there hadn't been a voice, I probably would be a missing persons case right now. It got me out of there. This August, my friends and I were taking a road trip from New York City to Rhode Island. None of us had been there before, so we were excited about the drive, especially because we rented a Mustang convertible for it. We left a little later than expected. It was about 10:30 p.m., and since it was a busy Friday night, we decided to punch our destination into GPS to beat the traffic. Eventually, we started losing steam, so my friend in the back seat fell asleep. I just kept driving along quietly, when my friend in the passenger seat told me to exit the freeway and take a side road. At first, driving on the unlit, winding back roads was relaxing. But then the wind picked up, and it got increasingly foggy and misty. I wasn't scared per se, just a little on edge. I was thinking about pulling over, put the top up, but decided against it since there were no other cars in sight. The forecast for the entire weekend was heavy rain, so I wanted to get the most out of the convertible. So I kept going along as normal, if not a little too fast to get back to the main roads as quickly as possible, when something just shifted. I don't know how to explain it other than it was unsettling, a feeling of being exposed. I remember pulling my sweater over my legs to cover up a little. Then my friend up front told me to look at the street sign in the distance. It read Purgatory. We woke up our friend in the back seat, who sort of scoffed it off. Seconds later, we went around a bend where a large red cross was installed on the side of the road with nothing else in sight. We shrugged it off as a creepy coincidence. By then, we were just kind of joking about it and indulging in the spookiness. But around the next bend, a big truck came hurling down the one-lane road straight at us. Luckily, my impulse was to swerve a little to the side. Otherwise, it probably would have been a head-on collision. We immediately found the quickest route away from this road. We didn't really discuss it after this because we were so creeped out. Haven't talked about it since, actually. But when I was writing the story, I decided to look it up. I spent about an hour trying to retrace our route and found the little road. It was indeed named Purgatory, and though we didn't notice it at the time, I could see on Google Maps that it was situated right near an old graveyard. Curious about the road, I researched it further and discovered that 2 teen girls had died there in August of 2011 in an accident when they were going to visit the grave of Rhode Island's infamous vampire Mercy Brown, who died in 1892. Apparently, they decided to go for a drive down this dark, windy road because they thought it looked haunted. I didn't grow up believing in ghosts because I didn't want to. There's enough to be scared of as it is. Then one morning when my friend's mom picked us up for carpool, we were about 16, I mentioned that I was really creeped out by this bathroom under the stairs in my house that no one ever used. For no particular reason, I just found it eerie. I grew up in a Victorian built in the 1800s, so eerie vibes were kind of part of the package. That reminded her of her own creepy bathroom association. She told me that when she lived in the countryside of Germany for a year, there was a little section in the home that no one but the middle sister used, who was about 9 years old at the time. During this time period, her sister would wake up with bloodshot eyes, sometimes even bruises, and felt totally exhausted. They did everything to investigate what was going on, including sleeping in her room, working with a child psychologist, and a school counselor. But my friend doesn't remember much from this time period, other than her sister being disturbed by something the year they lived there. She mentioned that she and her other sister, the oldest, also hated using that bathroom because it would always feel off and find thick black hairs stuck in the drain. All of them had fine blonde hair. At this point in the story, my friend's mother abruptly stopped the car, jerked her head around, saying, "That's where the woman killed herself. She drowned herself in that bathtub." Her mom was clearly shaken, and she said part of the reason they moved was because something felt off in the house. Shadows out of the corner of your eye. Messages from the other side. Whether a prankster or a savior, interactions with a ghost could be one of the greatest things about being alive. Also chocolate. If you have a ghost story yourself that you would like to share, feel free to email it to me at duchessdark676@gmail.com. See you next time.